Do you ever feel like your beliefs are shifting beneath your feet? My friends, you are not alone. Join me today as we explore how evolving faith can actually enrich your family life and why embracing change might just be the key to finding greater fulfillment. Hey, parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's walk and talk. Welcome back, my friends, to episode number 185, Growing Apart to Grow Together, Spiritual Maturity in Marriage and Families. I have been thinking about this a lot lately as I have been listening to different things about faith and as I've had certain clients that have really struggled with faith. And I feel like this is something that comes up again and again, but it's not understood very well. So I felt like we needed further exploration on this. And even for my own self, this is something that I really enjoy exploring and learning about. I just had some insights that I wanted to share today on the podcast episode. Now, before we launch in, I just want to remind you that our courses are now available. You can check out Find Your Focus, and that is available on our website. It's a very affordable course that will help you create a podcast and an online business. Those very beginning steps, like you don't need to know anything. This is your first one, and we're going to break it down for you. If you're like, I feel like I want to do that, but I don't know how, I don't know what I want to focus on. No worries. This is all about finding what your focus can be and how to begin that journey. It's just a 4-week course. So go ahead and check that out. We have other courses as well, personal growth and wellness courses like Ignite Your Life, a personal growth course, as well as Mend Your Marriage, which focuses on improving your marriage, deepening intimacy, both physically and emotionally. Those are 12-week courses to help you take your life to the next level in fulfillment. So check those out. Now back to the training for today. I don't even like calling it training because that makes it feel like work, but this is really going to improve your family life. Today, we are talking about spiritual maturity and spiritual fulfillment. Emotional maturity goes hand in hand with that. Recently, my clients have been navigating shifting faith and developing their spiritual maturity. Some might think this means one of them is leaving the faith, but that's not generally true. Faith develops in very different ways. And I've talked about my faith journey too. My husband and I have been in different stages where our faith was stronger or weaker. As a child, are you weaker because you don't understand things yet like an adult? No, it's just different. And the same goes for us. Maybe we have different understanding or levels of maturity, but that doesn't mean we're worse or better. We're learning to navigate that. I just want to very briefly hit on Fowler's stages of faith development. He has 6 different stages, and each one of those helps us mature when it comes to spirituality. You can check those out online. I don't want to go too much into that part of it, but just know that there are different stages of maturing. And even that can carry some judgment with it or development, we can call it. Just like my husband and I, depending on different life situations, I feel like you can move back and forth because different things might cause you to look at things differently or even occasionally go back. For example, a child might believe good behavior always leads to divine rewards, while an adult might question this view. So they might be in different stages. It really just depends on where they are in their faith journey. I was listening to a podcast episode by Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, and actually, we have had her on the show recently as well. She has some amazing insights. She's incredible. But she talks about how shifting faith can feel destabilizing, but it's a necessary part of growth. Maybe you have a spouse that has some questions or doubts, and maybe they don't even want to talk to you about it because they feel a lot of shame about that. A lot of times what I see with my clients is they leave those feelings for so long that once they finally come to me, they're just ready to leave their faith because it's so unpleasant to feel so alienated and so different rather than recognizing this is a normal stage of life. There's nothing wrong with you. You are just developing your faith. You're maturing in your faith. You're exploring your faith as you should. It's important to establish greater understanding, and we'll go into that more. So many adults in stage three, adolescence to adult stage in Fowler's faith development, have a strong identification with religious institutions. Most people stay in this stage. They seek to belong to their community through conformity. So they don't feel like a misfit. So they don't feel like they don't belong. Moving to stage four involves taking personal responsibility for your beliefs. It can feel a little bit lonely. Stage four is where, as an adult, you have that critical examination of your personal beliefs. For me, I think that I don't even know exactly when that started. Probably in my 30s, maybe even before, but more strongly in my 30s. I didn't really know what to do with it for quite a while. It felt uncomfortable because it wasn't this rigid and black and white view that I had for all of my life that I can remember. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife talked about how this can be really unsettling, and I completely agree. But spiritual maturity requires embracing those uncertainties and those complexities. I'm going to share a few different stories on what I've recently seen with some clients. I mentioned a while ago that I had one client that decided to not have me as a counselor when she found out that I was a certain denomination. And she had a lot of fears, judgments about my denomination. So I'm a part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. Rather than working through that and seeking understanding, she shut it off right away. And I say that there's a moment that I felt hurt and angry, maybe even a few moments. There are probably layers to it. I still feel some sadness because I've been in that situation before too, where I felt so fearful and uncomfortable being around somebody with a different perspective that I justified my actions, my behaviors, my thinking, and then got away as quickly as I could. There was a sense of that a little bit in my cohort in my master's program, where they mostly had very different views from me, both politically, religiously, and it was very difficult to be around them day in and day out and to feel like it didn't always feel safe to be myself, but I also didn't stand up for myself as much as I wish I would have. There was another client recently that discontinued services because she was really angry about the recent election. And she wanted to know, she asked me very bluntly how I voted. And she didn't even know what my political views were at all. We'd never discussed them, but made many assumptions. And when I wouldn't give her the answer that she wanted, which essentially was ridiculing anything that wasn't her perspective and really jump on board with her political beliefs, she just wouldn't feel safe. And she discontinued services. And I really tried to work with her before she did that and counsel her to surround herself with people that had different perspectives to grow her worldview. She wasn't willing to do that. I say that not out of a judgment, but to recognize that we also do that. If we want to get out of this space of spiritual immaturity, and not just spiritually, but emotionally, mentally, otherwise, it is important to do that. Another quick story, my book club Love them dearly. I think I've mentioned before, it's more group therapy, and we've been together for years. I want to say 10 years. There were so many different perspectives. One of my friends was very left and one was very right in their political views. I loved hearing how they felt passionately about both sides. These are two women that I really admired, but didn't feel unsafe, at least for me. I think they both felt charged many times and it felt difficult for them. It can be hard to be the one speaking up when somebody feels differently. For me, it was very freeing to be able to, in a safe environment, talk about different perspectives and recognize that we could challenge our perspectives and learn from each other. I loved that. And since then, some of them have moved away, so we don't have that quite as much, but I do miss that. Like, I love it when people challenge me. And even in that same book club, there's different ages. And recently, one of my friends gave me a different perspective for a different generation that's closer to her generation. And that did help me grow in understanding, maturity, and awareness that wouldn't have happened if I just surround myself with people of the same ages, the same beliefs. So, how do you do that? Do you make space to interact with people that are not exactly the same as you? Challenge that, surround yourself with people that are not exactly the same as you. Now, let's apply this to our daily life. Children interpret religious stories very literally when we're talking about Fowler's stages of development, and teens identify strongly with church teachings. Parents might question the beliefs they've held as they've moved more into that stage four, like I talked about a minute ago. So, a parent might struggle with answering one of kids' questions about prayer when they're having their own doubts, when they're starting to explore their faith in a way they may not have before. The point of this episode, my friends, is not to tell you, jump ship, go do this. The point is to recognize that those questions, those doubts, those things that you're facing, they're very normal, they're very natural. Nothing is wrong with you. You are just growing, and that is a beautiful thing. You don't need to feel like you're a misfit. You can recognize that your faith is evolving as it should. It's a beautiful thing, even. Now, let's talk about how it can show up in marriage. Well, couples may experience tension if their faith and the rate of their development is different, which I promise you it's going to be. Leaning into that and recognizing that you don't have to control your spouse is very important. We have to learn how to renegotiate those shared values and practices and let go of control of what they are doing or not doing. I really had to back away from my husband spiritually and navigate things personally without exploring that as much with him as I had in the past because I started to care too much about what he was thinking rather than what felt right for me has created more differentiation in our marriage instead of that unhealthy enmeshment. It's about psychological maturity and that differentiation that comes when you don't need so much validation from others and can explore things on your own. For example, in my church, our congregation is called our ward. In our ward, I do things now that I never would have done before. And I let it go more now because I feel like I've grown in maturity. This is not from an ego standpoint, although at times it can be a little bit ego driven, I'm sure. If someone needed a meal or if there was a need or something being passed around or a calling or anything like that, because I would have felt like that would be like I was more concerned with what people thought of me at times. Now, even if somebody says something in church that I don't agree with, I'm much more likely to raise my hand and respectfully and lovingly give a different perspective because all of us are at different levels of maturity. When they're just hearing one perspective, it can be really frustrating for the other people in the room that might quietly be struggling. So I'm way more inclined to do that, even if I might be misunderstood or people might not think that I'm as spiritually mature. Another example is I had always equated modesty with spiritual strength or how righteous you were. So I never wore tank tops when I exercised. I do a lot of weightlifting and running, and I would get really sweaty and I couldn't see my form as well. I finally decided to just try wearing a tank top to the gym, and I loved it so much. And there were still moments that I felt like I was not as spiritual. I was a bad person. I was lacking faith and less than for other people that were more righteous than me because I had made that choice. But I keep going back to pushing back against that and recognizing that I'm a good person, even though I do things a little bit differently, even though I might see things a little differently, whether that's with political views, how you worship on Sundays, what you wear, if you have a tattoo, whatever your beliefs or denomination, when we're talking about navigating those differences and how you show up with people around you and how you manage those differences. Now, let's talk a little bit more about your church community. Adults might feel discomfort when they come across teachings they once accepted without question. There's this desire for a more nuanced discussion about faith, or maybe just a slightly different discussion about faith than they would have had before. An example here is a church member feeling conflicted about speaking up when disagreeing with a leader's interpretation. Sometimes you're taught not to question those in authority. No matter what institution we are in, there can be some level of that. And it doesn't mean that they're these terrible people, but with that maturity, it's like learning to think for yourself a little bit and going inward and being reflective in your prayer and your own spiritual exploration of what resonates with you, even if it feels a little bit different than a church leader. Like maybe your bishop says otherwise, maybe your father in law or whoever it might be that you respect a lot says things differently, and you start to feel elements of shame or whatever that might be. So it's difficult to navigate those when we're in that stage three, but we're moving into stage four and it can feel lonely and isolating. Just remember that this is okay. And yes, it can feel lonely, and there's things that we can do. Now, let's talk about it in friendship. It might mean growing apart from friends who remain in earlier faith stages, and that's okay. Doesn't mean they're bad. It just might be they're in a different space. It can also mean seeking new relationships that support those evolving beliefs and not necessarily surrounding us with people that will just reinforce maybe our angst or anything like that. That's not a healthy dynamic that I'm talking about, but it might be surrounding yourself with those that are willing to have conversations about things that you find confusing and want to develop greater understanding and maybe even vent for a little bit. As long as you're not staying stuck there for too long, learning to explore it and move through it. Now, let's talk about what we can do to embrace that growth and greater authenticity. It does take courage to live honestly, even when it might disappoint others. That is no easy thing. Even as I grow in confidence, that is still a challenge. It requires a willingness to engage with different perspectives, and that can also feel confusing and even isolating. But we're developing an internal moral compass instead of solely relying on external rules and just adhering to what other people tell us. We're developing something deeper rooted so that when challenges come, we have those deeper roots. Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife said, we have to look at what am I actually doing and reinforcing through my choices? Do I need to be more cautious? Or do I need to challenge some of the structures for me to live more authentically? Sometimes people lose themselves when they start to say, oh, I just need to live my truth and live authentically. Like, I caution you, I'm not saying go do all of that. While I agree with a lot of those ideas, we can take it too far as well, where we just jump ship and say, oh, I have to live my truth. Let's explore your truth and authenticity with wisdom. This means having open communication about our doubts or questions. This means creating a safe space for family members to talk about their beliefs and questions and modeling that respect for different perspectives, even if you don't believe that or adhere to that at all. We can all do a better job about that. And that might mean resisting surrounding yourself with only like minded people, but engaging in respectful dialogue with those that think differently. This also means expanding your worldview so that you can foster greater understanding and empathy when you come face to face with something different than your own. Now, that's really easy to say, but I want you to think about surrounding yourself with people with a different political perspective. That can feel very threatening and unsafe. I can empathize with my client that dropped me because it does feel stressful when you don't know how other people think and how you will be supported. I assured her that I would definitely show up in a healthy way for her, but some people just are not there yet and don't feel safe doing that. And that's okay. They're at different levels of maturing. I use that hesitantly because it holds some judgment, but for lack of a better word, that's what I'm using right now. You can also seek those diverse perspectives in media and literature and conversations, practicing active listening without judgment and reflecting on your own beliefs by being open to refining them and recognize this is just a normal stage. It doesn't have to mean something is wrong with you. In fact, it means something is right with you. Be willing to embrace that spiritual growth and maturity that can really heal homes and communities because our community very much needs that right now. There is a growing division in America, our nation, the United States. And the only way that's going to change is if we model that for those in our sphere of influence. So we can step out of our comfort zone and engage with those different viewpoints. True fulfillment comes when we live more authentically and live in a space where we have continuous growth rather than just surrounding ourselves with people that are just like us, that will not encourage us to expand that worldview and our perspectives in a way we might not have otherwise if we were just around people just like us. All right. For sake of time, I will end right there, my friends. It's just a topic that I really love and enjoy. So thank you for listening with me today. Don't forget to check out our blog at fulfillmenttherapy.org/blog. We put all of these podcast episodes into a blog form. So if you ever want to go back and get those extra tools, those resources, those nuggets of wisdom, you can always find them there. You can also check us out on all major platforms for our podcast episodes or our own website at fulfillmenttherapy.org. And again, check out those courses, my friends. They will be game changing. All right. I will see you back in just a few days for more insight, for more wisdom on how to take your fulfillment to the next level, not only for you, but in your marriage and in your parenting. Until then, my friends. Hey, friends. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.